Host of the Justice Matters podcast. Glenn, my friend, it's so good to see you. Look, you and I have seen multi-page rulings in our lives, but this one's got a pretty decent price tag on it. Let's start with that ruling from Justice Engoron. What are your two top line takeaways?
Well, Katie, among the top line takeaways is I think we have to look at the trajectory that Donald Trump's civil trials have been on. He started by losing a $5 million judgment. Then he lost an $83 million judgment. Now he's lost a more than $450 million judgment. And as you say, he is barred from doing business in New York for a number of years. And here's the thing, as bad as all of that is, Lady Justice is just getting warmed up because next up for Donald Trump is his first criminal trial, and then he has 4 criminal trials stacked up. It is impossible to see how he survives politically, how he survives financially, and I think, you know, all of this is just Donald Trump slowly being taken out of the system for the civil fraud, the civil wrongs, and the crimes he is alleged to have committed.
You know, Glenn, I always say don't sleep on the civil cases, because even though people think the criminal cases are sexier, more interesting, sometimes it's the civil cases that can pack the biggest wallop. Before I move on from this case, I did want to ask you about the factual findings. So when you look at this 92-page ruling, Glenn, the way that the justice set it up was procedural history. How did we get here, right? And then he went into his factual findings, his determinations about the witness's credibility, for example. And then he moved on into the legal arguments before he reached his ultimate conclusion. Let's focus on Michael Cohen. We know that the New York DA, the Manhattan DA's office, is going to go to trial next month, Glenn. Michael Cohen is going to be a key witness. What are your thoughts about those findings about Michael Cohen's credibility? Do you think that's going to play any factor into that trial next month?
Yeah, no case is appellate proof. We all know that virtually every significant loss, whether in a civil setting or at a criminal trial, ends up getting appealed. But when you work your way through Judge Engoron's findings of fact and conclusions of law, it feels like Donald Trump can certainly appeal this judgment, but I would be very surprised if he won any relief on appeal. And listen, Michael Cohen's testimony was relied upon in this trial. I would call that important foreshadowing for what is to come, soon to come, beginning March 25th, the first criminal prosecution of Donald Trump for his attempt to interfere in the 2016 presidential election by making hush money payments and then by falsifying business records to cover up the nature of those hush money payments. Michael Cohen will be a star witness, and importantly, he will be bolstered considerably by an audio recording of he and the defendant, Donald Trump, talking about the very criminal scheme for which Donald Trump is on trial. So, again, I think this is some important foreshadowing, and I very much look forward to this first criminal prosecution kicking off in March.
Glenn, let's put our old prosecutors' hats back on. I want you to be DA Alvin Bragg. Tell me about the kind of jury you're going to be looking for when you do that jury selection process on March 25th.
So I'm going to look for jurors who can decide the case fairly and impartially based only on the evidence they see introduced during the course of the trial, not based on anything they may know about these charges, anything they may know about Donald Trump, or any political feelings or affiliation or ideologies they may have. Every juror is likely to have, you know, some idea of who Donald Trump is and what he's done. Every voter is likely to have some ideological beliefs, even if they're not active in politics. Maybe all they do is vote. Maybe they don't even vote. But the key is when they're going through jury selection, what we call voir dire, and importantly, jurors are placed under oath before they start answering questions during jury selection. In my experience, jurors generally take it deadly seriously, and they try to be truthful, accurate, and forthcoming. And they're going to have to say, listen, I can put all of my personal feelings aside. I can put aside anything I might know about Donald Trump and the crimes he's alleged to have committed. And I promise, I swear under oath that I can decide this case based only on the evidence I see introduced during the course of the trial. I think Alvin Bragg and his prosecutors will be able to seat a fair and impartial jury, and Donald Trump is going to get his fair trial.
Glenn, let's stick with this. Before I have to let you go, let's stick with this jury selection issue, because you and I both know, as trial lawyers, jury selection sometimes wins the case for you. It may not even matter what ends up going on, depending upon the jurors that you've picked. Do you look for jurors, Glenn, that are going to be, kind of focusing on the issues involving the fact that this hush money payment was made, and maybe there's some morality implications going on with the former president of the United States? Or are you looking for somebody who understands maybe the more nuanced issues that come with business records and the idea that the falsification of them are actually the felonies that are at issue in this case?
Yeah, great questions, Katie, because I've always said you can't win a case in jury selection, but you can sure lose a case in jury selection. So if you have a science-heavy case, some prosecutors and some defense attorneys want scientists on their jury. Some don't want scientists on their jury. I think what you want is a fully informed juror, regardless of what that juror's background is, whether that juror has a background in business and business records or not. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all proposition, and we can say all business people are either good or either bad. Each one you have to take on their own merits. When you look them in the eye, Katie, during jury selection, you have to quickly assess, based on what they're saying and how they're saying it, their demeanor, whether you think they're going to give the prosecutors a fair shake on the evidence and whether you think they're going to give the defendant a fair shake on the evidence. And I think that's what the parties are going to be looking for as they go through the jury selection process.
There's a legal science to it, as you and I know, and then there's also whether or not your BS meter is going off when they're answering you. Glenn Kirschner, thanks for getting us started today. And my friend, I always love to have you here because justice matters. Thanks for being here. And still to come on the